Hey, Steve Grant here, and I'm joined today by David Behrens. Now, David Behrens is a long-time colleague of mine. He uses kind of mindfulness meditation therapy with my clients, and well, with a whole bunch of different people as well. I wanted to speak to David today because we're kind of in amongst the kind of nitty and gritty now of coronavirus, and there's a lot of I guess the theme that I wanted to kind of jump on today was the theme of anxiety. Like I know personally for myself, even towards the end of last week, I was kind of feeling this tightness in my chest as we were looking at closing the clinic in London, thinking about, what are going to be the next steps. Are the clients going to move over to online consultations financially? What are we going to do? So there's all these kind of questions going around in people's heads, and so much kind of, I guess, uncertainty at the moment. And I think with that uncertainty, there brings quite a significant level of anxiety as well. So I think what we want to try and share today, ideally, is just some things, one that I've been doing, some things that David's been doing, and then just try and get a few golden nuggets from you as well, David, in terms of how we can help manage anxiety better.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here with you. So I think the first thing we can ask ourselves when we're looking at managing anxiety is what's happening inside? Because anxiety, of course, is an inner response happening within us, and then we identify it as anxiety. So I thought we would examine it, look at it in a very short way, and then how do we apply the mindfulness principles and practices to actually shift it, soften it, and possibly, we can say, bring it down. And, having someone like Steve here who understands the body so well, maybe just, what is anxiety? What's happening inside?
I mean, ultimately, I think what we're seeing on a physical level is we can see changes in the nervous system. We can see upregulation of certain hormones, certain neurotransmitters in the body as well, and it puts us in this kind of, in a sense, it's putting us in this heightened state of alertness, right? It's this fight or flight kind of response state, and these kind of short, acute moments of being in a fight or flight response state is actually quite natural. But what we find ourselves in with these kind of particular moments is that actually this anxiety can just build and build and build and build, and it often, and you'll appreciate this as well, is that it builds with the way the thoughts are going, if that makes sense. So the brain is kind of almost governing the nervous system in a way. So I think that's why there's this physical response, but there's these kind of layers of emotion and how we're interacting with our environment that are basically driving what the physical response is.
Yeah, so that is the principles very much, and that's why mindfulness and functional medicine, they go together so well, because again, it's this mind-body relationship. We can't deny it in response to our environment. So I would say, if we look at it, we can look at it in three simple pathways, and each person can do this for themselves. When I feel anxiety, what's going on in my mind? Just like the contents of your mind and anxiety is different than when you're feeling, before you ever heard of a thing called coronavirus and you were having a good day. Your mind was filled with one thing, but now we're filled with all the dread of the virus. So our mind's filled with all that and all the stories in the media. Okay, so we have this whole thing happening in our mind. Again, you shared this whole thing happening in the physical body, from tenseness to the different hormones and all this stuff of the stress response being turned on. And then we also have, which we'll talk about today, our breath. I'm sure if you take a moment, the moment you feel anxiety, you ask yourself, how am I breathing? And what might a person say? What would you say, Stephen?
Like shallow, yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so.
Or sometimes even not breathing.
Yeah.
Sometimes just holding.
It's not flowing. If we take the opposite of anxiety, where you feel good and everything's going well and you're having one of those really good days, there's a flow. And there's evenness of the breath. So mindfulness and the practices, mindfulness-based practices, is we apply these three pathways and we develop the skill to manage our mind, to manage our somatic body experience, and to manage our breath. And even any one of those three, if we become aware of and shift a little, we will manage the overall experience of anxiety in a very powerful way. And I'll share a few tips with these three pathways. And I think just before we were speaking, Steve and I, and you shared ways that has helped you, in a sense, dealing with those three expressions.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. So do you want to kind of kick things off and just go through
Yes.
some of your ways in which you'll help manage anxiety through those three areas?
Okay, let's take thoughts. What do we fill our mind with all day?
Yeah.
I think everyone is filling their mind with the coronavirus. And we're looking at media again and again. And our mind is so occupied with it. So a very simple thing now is we have to develop, you can almost say, a new relationship to media. And we have to train our mind what we fill it with.
Yeah.
And you shared with me just before, what have you decided as important?
Yeah, so I mean, I've done a couple of things because I found toward the end of last week, it was like the constant kind of looking at social media feeds and looking at news feeds and that sort of thing was probably the main driving force behind the level of anxiety that was being built. So I just set myself a couple of rules where, okay, I'm going to watch the news maximum twice a day. And then I'm going to essentially, move off of my social media news feed, maybe do that once or twice a day as well. And then that's basically it. And actually protecting myself and distancing myself, not ignoring what's going on, but knowing that there's a necessary amount of exposure. But beyond that actually isn't serving me in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, so we have to train our mind. And mindfulness is building the skill to train our mind. And in a moment, I'll share a very simple practice on how we work with our mind, how we work the somatic body experience, and how we work with our breath. And I'll just say, I'm sure with yourself, the somatic body experience, you have this amazing amount of skill on just how foods affect the physical body. What have you done? And you can also share further in sessions, but even as a tip now.
Yeah, so I think key things obviously that I would look for with that is food and certain things that we expose the body to have that ability to change the sense of self and what we're experiencing. Whether that is they're having a direct effect, like caffeine, for example, at the moment. If someone's quite prone to anxiety, then adding additional stimulants on top is probably not going to be the wisest thing. So we have to even look at the moment of how we manage caffeine. And you could look at that in a similar way with how we manage our blood sugar response to the type of foods that we're going to eat, and whether actually if we choose to eat kind of more wholesome food, more fiber, like generally good, well-balanced meals, actually that's going to help just regulate our energy levels, our mood, that sort of thing as well. And in some people that are prone to like periods of low blood sugar, if we can prevent that, those people that have that kind of tendency towards low blood sugar, that can actually create another kind of response whereby the body's producing more stress hormones as well as a way of dealing with that. So it's another thing that can trigger off anxiety in people through physical changes. And another one that I would certainly look at is alcohol. With people, alcohol, people are often, especially at the moment, I think people will use it as a sedative. So something to try and calm them down at the end of the day. But the challenge with alcohol is that it's a known stimulator of anxiety in people that struggle with anxiety. So one, it can have a kind of negative effect on the depth and quality of sleep that we experience. But then usually the day after, people are actually in a slightly heightened state of anxiety following alcohol as well. So it then, when you talk about exacerbating our or should we say dampening our resilience to stress, I think alcohol has that potential following exposure to it.
So you have so much knowledge in that area, and it's great that you're giving us these important tips. What I'd like to do now is offer a simple 3 to 5 minute mindfulness practice.
Cool.
Directly deal with this anxiety, with what's happening in our mind. And remember, we have power to decide what we fill our mind with, but then we want a moment. What could we do in just 3 to 5 minutes to be with our mind, to kind of bring down this wild thinking that we could have at times? How do we deal with our somatic body experience? And we're going to use a lot of the support of the breath, because we can almost say that every time you experience anxiety, it's reflected completely with your breath pattern. It's a guarantee. You will never be breathing nice flow in and nice flow out and have anxiety. It's like it doesn't go together. It's like oil and water, they're separate. So let's spend a moment, just see how it feels. Everyone in their own way will do a practice. Step 1, and we'll do it together. If you'd like, if it's comfortable, you can close your eyes. So this is a mindfulness, like meditation, 3 to 5 minute practice. Step 1, become aware of your physical body. We'll do that layer first. And be aware of whatever you're feeling. So if there is any anxiety, yes, it might be in the tummy, it might be in the chest, by the lungs. You feel a little bit of tightness, so it's constriction. So we focus on just sitting comfortably. So each person, if they're sitting in a chair or couch, tune into one part of your body that feels comfortable. It could be your back. It could just be your hands resting in your lap, or your eyes gently closed, or the mouth, the teeth are softly touching, the tongue is resting. Just tune into one part of your body feeling supported and rested for even 30 seconds. I'll take care of the time. Just practice this. The hands, the back, any part of the body, or even the feet just touching. Now, be aware of your own mind. We all have this busy speaking mind that goes in all directions. So for 1 minute now, try to be aware of your busy mind. You can even speak to it for a moment. Oh, busy mind, I'm just going to watch you for a moment. You can go wherever you choose, but I will just observe you. Observe your own mind. Where does it go? I'll be silent for 1 minute. And now for the final minute or two, remember, we have the power to guide our mind where we choose. Guide our mind to just be aware of, how am I breathing now? Is it a little softer now, or is it still imbalanced? Be aware of the length that it goes out and the length that it goes in. We don't need to change it. We just need to be aware of it. And that often softens it. Be aware of breath in, breath out. If you sense that it's short, let your in-breath be a little bit longer, 1 or 2 seconds longer, consciously. So breath in, and then gently breath out. Just 3 breaths like that. So it's even, the breath in and out, 1 or 2 seconds longer on both ends. And now for the final minute, try to sense how when you breathe in, the chest or the tummy expands a little bit. And gently it softens when you breathe out. Just sense that for 1 minute, a few more breaths in and a few more breaths out. You can open your eyes now. Gently stretch. So the main practice is at different times in the day, check in with yourself. What's happening in my mind might be first, or what's happening in my body now, or how am I breathing? And any one of these three, we can do something with. If we take those moments to guide our mind to a healthy place and discipline it a little, or we take a moment to just have a restful moment, sitting in the garden if we have one, or just sitting by our window and looking at the sky and maybe opening it up, or let the sun touch our face on a sunny day.
Yeah.
And then the simple practice of be aware of your breath and learn the skill to create this even breath. But sometimes just being aware of it and adding 1 or 2 seconds on both ends, and that will affect these three parts that anxiety expresses.
I think that sounds great. I think there's a couple of really key things that I'll pick up on there as well. I know I speak to clients about almost giving themselves like mini holidays in their day, the same way that you would take a week vacation or a couple of week vacation at various points in your year, is having these moments within your day where you're actually able to kind of have these little mini vacations like that, where you're able to check in with yourself and bring a certain level of kind of restoration back to the body and to the mind. And I think last week we spoke, I think you used the analogy because there's so much in the news and still is about washing your hands. And we spoke about the ability to actually wash the mind as well. And to just kind of clear it of some, not necessarily clear it, but like to just kind of cleanse it a little bit of some of the thoughts that can be going on, just to center yourself again. And I think that works really well. And then one other thing that I wanted to pick up on as well is, because we see a lot of people with digestive issues, and there's so much anxiety can be such a massive cause of people's digestive issues from an underlying perspective, is that utilizing these practices of mindfulness therapy, breathing exercises prior to eating, and kind of eating in that kind of mindful state, that kind of relaxed state, I think is really, really important as well, especially in the environment that we find ourselves in at the moment as well. So I appreciate the messages and the practice and everything like that you did today.
Yeah, so know that we're available, Steve and I, to support you, and we're going to continue to offer these practices and tips and approaches. And it's a time where we can support each other.
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully what we'll try and do is we're going to kind of look at certain themes. So a little bit like today was a big one, the sort of area of anxiety, which we'll probably actually reflect on again in future ones, but we'll start looking at other subject areas as well, and try and bring you hopefully some hints and tips, and within it maybe some practices and stuff like that as well.
Very good. We'll meet each other again very soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.